Hello, everybody. I guess I'm the host. We didn't talk about this, but I should be the one
You
taking
are the host,
control.
man.
This is the save file where we talk about faith in STEM, and I have flipped the microphone or flipped the script a little bit with Glauber. I was on, I think, the second episode,
That's right.
and yeah, I am. After we finished chatting, I just thought, hey, like you've got really awesome stuff to talk about too. So why don't we flip it? And so that is what today is. We're gonna hear about Glauber and his uh, time as a atheist, and then transitioning into Catholicism, and all of that from the lens of a professional in STEM. Did I miss anything that you want to
No,
talk
man.
about?
In fact, I should just do this completely and get you to be the permanent host. Just you did so great, and great T-shirt, by the way.
Oh
You're
yeah.
you're killing it. There you go.
That was I'm
Awesome.
pretty sure I got that at
Yeah,
Epic Web Conf,
yeah.
so or maybe
Which
Remix Conf.
we changed the logo, so I mean it's here. It's just a
Oh
nicer
yeah,
figure. Uh, I
I've got
kind of like that. Some people call it the Aztec mask, right? This
uh-huh,
one,
yeah.
but it looks like it's imposing. It's nice, but I like the new logo. We have a mascot now as well, and I've been look, Kent. I'm so excited to be here, and you will notice. Actually, put this on Twitter. We changed the so I don't have a lot of time to, unfortunately, and my wife is doing all the editing on the podcast for me, but she was careful enough to change the image that we're using in the intro and put your name on it as the host. So there you go.
Ah, very good.
All thought of.
Well, thank you, Glover's wife. Really appreciate that. um, so yeah, we're really this is live, and so people are watching on X. We've got people on YouTube, and there's another service. I forgot what it's called. What is the
Yeah, Algora.
Agora?
We cannot, unfortunately. So if you are on Algora, we cannot. The comments that you put on Algora do not show up here.
Hmm.
But if you comment on X or YouTube, the comments are here. So we have here somebody who wants a torso shirt. We got plenty of them. One day that we meet at a conference, maybe we'll make that happen. Just to,
Yeah, actually, Epic Web Camp is coming up in September, and you're going to be there. Maybe just pack a couple extras. I don't know if Taryn's
awesome.
going to make it, but so well, great. Let's get into things. The if I understand it correctly, the goal of this podcast is for people of faith to share with one another, or to share with people who are curious
Good people, yeah. Hmm.
about our faith and our ability to have faith in an industry that is dominated by if I can't see it, it's not real sort of
Hmm.
attitude. And so I think a way to kick this off for our conversation is to get your story of how you got into Catholicism or just a belief in Jesus Christ.
How I got into it or how I got out of it at first, because
Let's start. Let's start. You know, from I you were born one day, and then
I was born one day. Yeah, I was born in November the 30th, 1982. So like it's been a while. I still remember fondly the days in which I was the young one, and we were looking forward to the year 2000, which is when a lot of our audience was born, or even after that. But like, and I was born in a, I like to say, nominally Catholic country. I in fact question. In fact question if it's actually a Catholic. We'll get there maybe later, but nominally. And I was not born in Canada where I am today. I was born in Brazil, and I had a very rough childhood in a lot of senses. And I think this is for me the hardest part to talk about, but because all of the guests so far have been sharing like those very emotional experiences, I think I'll do my best. Um, I I made my first friend at age 13. So the first when I interviewed Tejas, he was talking about like this physical things that he had to go through in his childhood that were terrible,
hmm
and other people talked about things that they had to go through later in life, but specifically the thing that defined my childhood, and is that like I just didn't have any friends. Nobody liked me, and Brazil, if you are familiar with the country at all, and if you know people from there, it's a very collective country in a sense that here in North America in general, you have more of this idea of like, hey, look, I mean, you do you, like just and you're free to pursue the things that, and that's not to say that those things are not explicit, that they're not present at all, but society in general is a much more collective society in the sense that, hey, this is who we are, and which has good and bad things. And one of the bad things is that if you're not like that, it just, there is nothing for you.
Yeah.
So I not only I didn't have any friends, people were hostile to me. So like I grew up in this environment where like my family they liked me, of course, even though they were always trying to change me because, just you're not where you're supposed to be. But people at large around me were very, very hostile to me. And so a bunch of bullying, a bunch of physical altercations as well, and all sorts of stories. Like, some of them, I just don't even want to go there. But at age 13, I made my first friend, which was the most I had before that were people who would sometimes play video games with me because our parents knew each other and they dropped the kids together, but that's it. Like there's no connection there. And so I mean, I still keep in touch with those people. They are pretty much the only people I keep in touch. And by the way, just a parenthesis here, lots of people who know me that are from Brazil, I think they sometimes don't like the fact that if they approach me and people approach me on like LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., and I know you're from Brazil as well, so they send me a message, and I always respond in English. And the reason for that is that when I was 6, my mom, noticing like the world back then, I mean, think it's the 80s, right? So the world was not as globalized as it is today, but it was becoming more open. And my mom correctly identified that it would be important for me to learn English so I could, go into the world and not be stuck in here, which was, a great thing. And I did not know English because I was studying. And again, I was 6. But I also didn't have a very complex mind because I was 6. So I remember that, and I remember this very, very vividly. After the classes were over, as a way to practice, I would speak to myself. And because of that, my thought process has always been in English. I always spoke English to myself. And not that I had anybody else to speak to because nobody would talk to me. And so I have a really hard time speaking Portuguese. I don't like it. It brings bad memories. And by age 8, already, I had this world inside my head, which was the world that I liked. And that world took place exclusively in English because it started with me like practicing. So when my father passed a couple of years ago, but I always had a very rough relationship with him because of this, because of those cultural differences. My father was very quintessentially Brazilian, and so many things that I wanted to have told him that I did not, but those conversations I had with my father in my mind were always in English, but then I could never go and tell him because there was a mismatch in there. And when I lived in Brazil, I spoke Portuguese because that's what everybody's doing. But after I left, I lost that muscle, and it's just a very emotionally hard thing for me to do. I was actually recently in Brazil because we organized True Tour, so that event with the Primogen, and even then, like I just don't. I just pretend I don't speak English. I don't speak Portuguese. And if you don't understand, I just go to another shop or ask my wife to do it for me, or etc. But and I think this will be important later in this conversation. But because this was a part of the journey, right? And it was a part of the journey back then, and I think it was a part of the journey later as well. But also, like, if you happen to be in the audience here, and if you sometimes at some point try to speak to me in Portuguese and took offense that I didn't, like, this is why, and I hope you understand. And like, I do try because, some people sometimes struggle and they don't speak English very well. So I do try, but it's a very, very, very hard thing for me to do. So I was born in this context, right? So this is the context where I grew up. So having a friend was good. I mean, it happened pretty late in my life. Imagine that, like, it's just
Yeah. Sounds very lonely.
yeah. And it was more than lonely, because it's not like I don't know if people have experienced anything like that. It's not like everything is fine and then I just don't have a friend. It's like your whole life is is different. Like, you just lack, like, connection, and you have this feeling like this that I still have it, to be honest. I mean, I'm not there like this, but things that you experience as a child, I think they stay with you for a long time. And so at age 13, I was depressed. I took antidepressants around that time, because as a teenager, which I don't think was great, but didn't really solve much, because there is an issue in there. But at the time I started using the internet. So the internet came around. There was like 90 something, 1994, 1995 or 6, or around that time. And I made a bunch of friends on IRC. And those were people that I would talk to, and I guess they were also misfits like me, in a sense. So I made some friends, and for the first time in my life, I had friends. And those people were very important to me, because I don't think I could have stayed in this world for much longer if that situation just kept going. Because a lot of people talk about the importance of suffering, even in the religious context, and like how suffering is important. I talk about that too. But that's what I told Tejas the other day. Asking that of a kid is hard, because as a kid you don't have any of the of the tools to deal with that. Like, as an adult today, if I have to suffer, I can put this in context, and I can say, hey, look, I mean, this is for a reason, and I want to go through it. And
you have perspective.
Yeah, as a kid, it's just hard, man. Like the stuff that other kids would do and talk to me, like, and at some point it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the other kids see that you just don't react, because what else, after a couple of years, like my life, I was just going through life, then you become an easy target, right? Just and so that was my childhood, and essentially. And so those folks that I met at age 13, like, I think it's safe to say that they influenced my life greatly. Again, not necessarily in a way that I appreciate today, but I do have this perspective that, man, the alternative was probably much worse. We would not be talking here today. And it was great to have friends. It was great to have people, and for me, it was really the first time to have people that just it seems like this person likes me for one reason or another. Right?
Did you have siblings? I can't remember if you mentioned.
Yeah, I have one brother. Yeah.
How close are you and your brother?
Less close than I would like, and I think it's my fault, just because, man, it's hard. Family is a very hard subject for me, because it's very hard for me to detach family from all of this environment. On a rational level, I understand, like, my family is my family, and the people in there are the people in there. But on an emotional level, I think even though rationally I can make the distinction, it's hard for me to make this distinction. So my brother is a very nice person. He's a very nice guy. And I wish I had a closer relationship with him. And he's also a little bit unlucky because I actually had a good relationship with my brother very recently because we were playing a game together. And I think I mentioned in another episode that I was addicted to a unhealthy degree to this game.
Hmm.
And the game Civilization, if you know, and I actually started playing. I started playing this game around this time. I started playing Civilization 2. I think I was 14. I've been playing pretty much since then, um, and it wasn't a way for me to escape things, and it got really unhealthy. But I used to play online with my brother, and after I stopped playing, and I really like one day decided, with the grace of God, that like, look, I have to stop it. And I tried many times throughout the years to stop it, many times, and I never could because something would always pull me back. One day I could, thankfully. But my brother and I played the game together, and we talked a lot about the game. And just at some point, I think all of our conversations became about this.
Hmm.
And then when I stopped playing, I think we kind of grew a little bit more distance, which I hope I could fix one day because my brother really is a great guy. But going back to trying to steer the story back into like the religious part of it, I was Catholic in name because that's how most people in Brazil are. There, just I understand that a lot of my audience is not Catholic because in North America it's not the default. It's the default will be some form of Protestantism, and so I don't expect people to know a lot about Catholicism. But again, you have this country that portrays to be a Catholic country. Like if you go ask people, what are you? And I think 70-80%, maybe less today, will tell you I'm Catholic. But then there's this big party in February called the Carnival, where everybody just goes and have sex with each other and etc. Like, I mean, that doesn't sound very Catholic. And then
Nope.
and then every year at the end of the year, or the beginning of the year, like there is this New Year's party. Especially like I was born in the coast of Brazil. There is this New Year's party that everybody goes to the beach, and then they put those offers to this African goddess. And light a bunch of candles on the beach and put some roses, and then you do some rituals. And like again, that doesn't sound very Catholic, if and or Christian in general. But if you go ask people, they will say, yeah, sure, we're Catholic. And what does that mean? Is that means that you were baptized, and like if you get married, you get married in the church, and you have this general sense that there is a God somewhere. And so I did take my first communion, which is something that Catholics will do, like which is the first time you're going to take the Eucharist. I did not know what that meant, and I did not know the significance of that. Nobody told me. For me, it was just a ritual that you go through. But what I did not do was my confirmation, which is when you are around 16, you as Catholics are baptized as infants, so you don't have the ability, of course, as infants to choose anything. But later on, through your own volition, around the age of 16, you get confirmed, which is something that I've done recently, right? I did not get confirmed at the time because in this meantime, I just got out of it. And this friend of mine that I made at age 13, he was a little bit of a troublemaker, and on a good sense, which was great for me because I mean, it was able to pull me out of this nothingness that I was in. And I remember this guy one day we went to the gym together, and he was telling me, look, he was very proudly telling me, the teacher at the school asked me to do like, we all had to do a presentation about religions in class. And I did one about Satanism, or atheism or whatever. I don't even remember which one he did, but like, completely out of like I want to be the different guy that that just get. And as I walked with this crew more and more, and this person, I'm still in touch with him, and I like him a lot still. At the time, I think it was more something like just let's rebel against the whole thing, and which for me was great, getting out of the system, and I remember myself as being a very pious, borderline gullible person. But as I got these influences out of like, hey, let's just kick everything down. And school was also a very, like, the teachers at the time were very anti-establishment, and I think the Catholic Church was an easy target for them in the sense that just it is an easy target in a lot of ways for a lot of people, and I remember that I was sitting on a bus stop, and for a while already, I always liked philosophy, and so those friends that I had were very intellectual people, still are. And so for the first time in my life, I actually had like people who just like to sit down and think about stuff and not just talk about soccer, which is the only subject in Brazil that is allowed by law. And so we're talking, we're chatting, and then you learn about the Catholic Church did horrible things, and then God doesn't exist because evolution, and the teachers are feeding this thing, and like I had all of those influences around me, and this friend of mine, by the way, he was a lot more on the occult at the time, occult kind of esoteric thing, like just then pure atheism, like and later on I actually got into that. I had a couple of years in my life where I was like into New Age spirituality, but at age 14, I remember I was sitting in this bus stop, and I had this, again, remember, there's a 14-year-old child. I had this thought in my mind. I don't think there's a God. And I don't think there's a God because of the things that I am learning, about, because of the things that I'm experiencing. But what if, and this is what crossed my mind. I mean, and it's not that this is something that stood with me. I only remember that this happened many years later. But what if this is all a plot from Satan to make it appear so that I get out of this? And so I had this debate within myself for a couple of weeks. It doesn't seem to me that God exists, but like, would not Satan be able to fool me in that regard, to make it appear like that's the case, just to test me?
Yeah.
And then after a couple of weeks just struggling with this, I was sitting on this bus stop, and then I said, God, if you're real, I'm truly sorry. Again, I just can't do this anymore. And if you're real, one day, please bring me back. But from now on, I have to go with what my senses are telling me and what my intellect is telling me. And at that day, I declared myself an atheist, and I said I don't believe in God anymore. So that's how I got out of the.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's quite the story, and I appreciate all the context that you've given us, and being so vulnerable about your childhood. It seems like just an incredibly difficult situation to put a child through, to feel so lonely. Sometimes my kids have struggle with friends and things, and one of the things I'm really grateful for is that they're at least friends with each other. And I had a lot of siblings growing up myself, and eventually I grew a little more distant with my closest sister. And so maybe that will happen with my kids. They'll just kind of grow distant from each other. But right now they play with each other constantly. And I really appreciate that, because you can't always really count on friends, not only on them being there at all, but them being a positive influence. And it sounds like for you, the friends that you made when you were 13 were positive in some ways, and
well, they were, yeah. I mean, just there were more than one, because I got into this group of friends, which is also a good thing, right? Just it's not just like, oh, I made this one friend, and through this friend, I made other friends as well. So I had, I have a group of people that then went on with me, and I still keep in touch. The only people in Brazil I still keep in touch are those guys, pretty much. Nobody else I keep in touch with. But look, I think the reason I wanted to share that story. First of all, because just I've been so blessed that my guests share like their stories as well. But I want to make something clear. I just don't like Brazil.
Oh
and
no.
I just and I'm sorry, like, and I'm truly sorry for the people, and I know many people today that I deal with that are not like that, and like they are from Brazil. There are people in my company that are from Brazil. They're actually quite aware of my quirks and that, but like I think sometimes they take offense, but in a rational way, I understand. I mean, every place has its pros and cons. I get all of that, but in an emotional sense, I just don't like it. And I will get there later, but I want to, in context here, just mention that when I became a Christian, the last thing I wanted, was to be Catholic. In fact, what I thought is that, okay, now that I accept Jesus, I need to figure out what to do with it. And I don't know what I'm going to become. So I took a look at a bunch of stuff, like all the Protestant sects and this, like, and all of that. But the one thing I'm not going to do is become Catholic, because for me, this was very closely associated with Brazil.
Yeah, you have
Right?
scars there.
I said that's the thing that I do not want. Like anything but that, right? Just that and so I mean I think I'll tell you the whole story when we get to that point. But I think in context here is important to say that, because look, the other day I was talking to a friend here in the company. You know him well, and he is an atheist, and he was playing this thing that a lot of atheists, and myself included, when I was on the other side, say religion is all cultural. And like even the people who convert later in life, they're converting to the things that were around them, because it's all like this it's not real, it's just cultural. Because like if you were born in Iran, you will likely be a Muslim, but then you were born in Brazil, and like, man, this could not be further from the truth, at least for me, because again, like, sure, you could say that I'm a Christian and not a Muslim, and Brazil is a Christian country, and I grew up with that context. But in fact, if it's anything, like everything that I associated in my mind with like the place that I was born at, it's the things that I do not want it. Like this, like I try my best to say, like, I don't want this in my life. And again, later on, when I finally accepted Christianity, I said, fine, but now I need to figure out what to do with this, because the one thing I'm not doing is stepping foot in a Catholic church, because this is ridiculous, right? And here I am. So
Yeah,
it's not a cultural thing.
since we're talking about that, I know I want to get back to more of your story, how you got back into things, and
Yeah.
but I wonder, what is the big, so is it okay that it's cultural? Maybe like
Yeah.
I think you and I can agree that there's more to it than just the culture, but
Mm-hmm.
could it not be that culture has a big part of what faith we end up believing? And why is that a problem?
Well, I think the problem, and this is my old atheist self responding, is that there's a truth statement here, right? Is this religion true or not? Is this religion, like, you're already telling
Mhm.
me things that I cannot verify. So are there, which again I dispute today, but this is
Yeah.
the thinking, because you can verify it, and I did, but so I'm already being asked by you to believe this thing that is completely arbitrary from my point of view. If it's just cultural, then chances are it's not true. I mean, it's just like that
Hmm.
you grew. It's just an idea that you grew up with, or other people around you grew up with. That is why it sounds true, but it's not really true. So I think when people say like it's just cultural, that is what they mean. Like okay, so just it's not something true. It's just something that people made up, and that thing that people made up creates a cultural environment that you grew up with. Then you feel comfortable with the consequences of those things. But were you
Hmm.
to grow up somewhere else, you'd be comfortable with a different set of things, and they're all made up to begin with. So I think that is
Yeah.
where the cultural folks are getting into. This is all made up to begin with.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'll mention my faith is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and one of the unique characteristics of our church is a belief in another book of Scripture called the Book of Mormon. And just yesterday in Sunday school, we were talking about some characters in the Book of Mormon who came with that argument. And so this has just been on my mind, and it's kind of interesting. And one thing that I raised my hand and talked about during that meeting was that like the cultural aspects of faith are actually a very good thing for children in particular, because you can't expect a child to know the meaning of baptism or communion or whatever, like as they are just so young, to really understand that significance, or even just attending church on Sundays. And so so you teach them, and for them at that time, it's just like, this is just a thing that we do. But then hopefully over time, they develop that understanding and deeper meaning for what it actually means for them. And so I would say that, yes, absolutely, it's cultural. I think it would be silly for anybody to say it's not. But there's more to it.
The question is, does religion influences culture, or does it stem from culture, right? Because keep in mind that the idea that the natives has in mind is that this isn't real, this is made up, so it's just a cultural thing that we invented, and I don't believe in it. So like you telling me that somehow, because in I think in their defense, people would say, hey, look, I mean, this person converted, so, you know, maybe, right, just it go look deeper. And the defense then is that, no, but they only converted because it's cultural, which, again, I don't accept. Look, what I do accept is that, yes, there is a tendency, as you described, for you to grow up in a culture, and then you adopt the things from that culture. But I know a lot of people that were raised in one culture and converted to other things. That happens, right? Just they could be the minority, but it does happen. And I know my example, and I grew up in a hostile culture. Some people look, and I don't really think this, but some people sometimes ask me, "Are you Brazilian?" And I say, "No, I'm a decent person," and I'm not. I hope, I hope that doesn't offend anybody, because I'm not claiming on a rational level that Brazilians are not decent people. Some of them are, but it's a culture that really truly hurt me, and I think that I have those scars around me, and I truly don't feel Brazilian. And then the story that I tell is that, no, I'm just joking about that, but like I'm a refugee in Canada. Which and because they kicked me out of the country because I don't play soccer, which is
maybe it's because you call it soccer instead of football.
Well, in Portuguese I call it football or whatever, but like it is only half true, because I mean soccer, I truly was 70-80% of my problems, because even as a child I did not like soccer. I'm not a sportsy person. I don't like sports in general, but I truly never liked soccer. I think it makes no sense. It's probably the worst sport ever. And like in Brazil, this is unacceptable. Like, this is unacceptable. People introduce each other in parties. Like, the first question you get asked is like, what team do you root for? And then there are all those rivalries they have to keep track of who hates who. But my answer was always the worst. My answer was like, I just don't like soccer. And then all of those people who hate each other would unite against me. Right? What do you mean? And like, my father was a soccer player. I have a picture when I was like 15, like, or something. Like, I have a picture with Pelé in his swimming pool, because my father was friends with Pelé, and I hated this whole thing. So like, my father was unable to talk to me because he could not. He was also not a very educated man. He didn't even finish high school, as far as I understand. Something I shared in your podcast. They were born on a farm in the 1940s. He had 12 siblings. Yes, he was not a very educated man. he was unable to talk without using soccer metaphors.
Huh.
And I was, man, I wanted to study Greek philosophy. Just that's the thing that I liked as a kid, right? So there was no place for me in that culture, and so it was just like I tried, especially after I left, because when I was there, I think I had the sense that I just don't like my environment. But there was this thing about water, like watering the fish in the water, right? You don't, it's just water, you don't even know.
Oh, right, sure.
When I left Brazil, then I look back, I said, "Oh my Lord!" I mean, my life could have been so much different. And like I just,
Mm.
and then this feeling of like dread and depression turned into something a lot stronger, which is just what it is. So for me, I can guarantee you that I am not a Catholic today for cultural reasons. So, I do appreciate the culture. Like there are some cultural aspects on that, but it's not oh, this is the thing you grew up with. That's why later when you had this and this in your life, you came back to this point. That's not that, because just doesn't fit my story.
Yeah, and I think that is a really important aspect of faith, because you don't want to be converted to a culture, because that culture can change and it can hurt you,
Mm-hmm.
as you've described, and maybe the people around you can act very poorly, but the what
Mm-hmm.
you're converted to should be the Savior, Jesus Christ, and what He did and what He expects of you, and how he wants you to live your life so you can be as happy as possible, all of that. And so I think that's really profound and important for people to take away from this conversation is, as a person of faith who lives in a world that's very secular, if you want to maintain that faith, then your conversion needs to be to the Savior, Jesus
Yeah.
Christ, and not to the established cultural norms.
Yeah, and I do find today a place for culture, but I think you're absolutely right. I mean, culture has to be a consequence. And look, we there is a sense in which I'm a Western man, and so a lot of my value system comes from Christianity. So that I admit, but it is something. It has to be something like it that flows out of Christianity, and not something that like. So we are Christians, and because we're Christians, we act a certain way. We believe certain things, and the result of that is a certain culture,
Yes.
and not something. Oh, you know what? I like beautiful churches, which I do, but that has to be the end game and not the beginning, right? Just
Hmm. Yeah, actually, this I think we could probably move on from this
yeah,
soon. But the last thing I wanted to mention about this was when I got my job at Remix, working full time. It used to be, wow, Kent really likes Remix a lot. He must like use it and think that it's really great. But then when I started working there, everybody's like, "Well, you're just a corporate shill."
yeah,
And like you're just talking about it because you work there,
because you work there, yeah.
and I think that like two things can be true at the same time. You can be committed to Jesus Christ and also have been influenced by the culture at the same time. And like the church can be true and also have a big impact and influence on the culture.
Hmm.
And so yeah. Anyway, we can. I think
Yeah,
we that's that.
moving on, like on my story, like around age 16, so 2 years down, like I became this very edgy atheist kid, probably extremely annoying. If I look back, I mean, I think I would be annoyed if I found myself back then. Deeply materialistic, and when I was around 16, like I said, my those group of friends that I met, they were more like into like edgy stuff in general. And I had an experience that like, which again today I don't attribute to anything, but I had, keep in mind. I mean, I'm trying to put folks into my headspace as a now 16-year-old boy, and full of conflicts and confusion and etc. Because I also think my life went in a way that I was better than I could have been, but I took some local maximum compromises in the meantime. So like I'm not proud of the person I was, and
Well,
just
what like when you leave the faith, you lose some of the things that they have you doing, and you don't know why. You lose
Mhm.
those things, and there's some wandering that goes on, trying to figure out like what am I supposed to do. So
Yeah.
yeah, it makes sense.
But I think part of the reason, like again, I think it doesn't even matter. I'm not going to go in there, so we don't go into a completely different tangent. But I was in a party, so I spent my almost every weekend I was just partying and partying with like very shady people, and uh, there was this one party that I was in, and those things actually bother me a bit. I played a little bit just as a mechanism of social acceptance, but there was this one party that I was in, and I remember that, where people just started smoking pot with pages with pages from the Bible. So they would just rip off pages from the Bible and use it to roll their joint and smoke pot.
Wow.
I never did drugs in my life, which I think is a miracle. Which, given this, and I went into this thing like full rebellion, but for whatever thankful reason, I never touched any drugs. Never had a cigarette, but like, and given the environment that I was at, I think it's again miraculous. But like, I started going to like those incredibly interesting environments where I wouldn't want my kids to go. And one day, I was at this party, everybody drunk, and I pass out. When I wake up, I have this other friend who was hypnotizing uh, so the friend A was hypnotizing friend B, and according to him, he claimed that he could hypnotize you and bring back memories of your past life. So there he is in this party doing this, and friend B laying on the floor. It's funny because when people do this, nobody is ever a peasant. Everybody's a king, a general. Like in your past life, you're always somebody very important. Like so,
Hmm.
Napoleon, or you're Tutankhamun come to life back again. So friend B is laying on the floor, telling those stories about his past life, and friend A is directing the process. Now, where are you now? What do you see? And I'm the sketchy, the edgy atheist. I just, man, this is such bizarre nonsense. Like, this is nonsense. If this is true, do it to me. And the guy said, sure, I'll do it to you. So I lay down on the floor, and he starts hypnotizing me. Which again, today I don't attribute any like non-physical things to it, but at the time, in this 14 to 16-year-old purely materialistic guy, this guy could not hypnotize me because this just wasn't a thing, and he could not extract things from my past life. I mean, because there's no such thing.
Hmm.
And then he starts counting down from 10 to 1, and saying that you're not gonna, as I count down, you're not gonna feel your feet. And when he gets to 5, I stop feeling my feet. And then I think, yeah, whatever, coincidence, I'm in this position. And then he moves on to my knees and counts down from 10 to 1. And when he gets around 6 to 4, I can no longer feel my knees. And then he moves to my hips, and I can no longer feel my hips. So at that moment, I was like, this dude is giving me commands without touching me. He's just saying things, and he's shutting down my body. And I started to go desperate. Like I went desperate. I don't think I've ever felt more fear in my life. In a sense, I was like, what can this person do to me? And I started fighting really, really, really hard. So when he got to my neck, I'm not kidding. I couldn't feel a thing in my whole body, and that thing didn't fit my model of the world at the time. And he did not put me to sleep because, man, I thought hard. My whole mind went into this mode of like, I will not go to sleep. I will not go to sleep. I will not go to sleep. And he then later said, oh man, you see, not always it works, and etc. And I'm still learning. And I said, yeah, this is nonsense. But inside, I was like, holy crap, right? So it's just it messed up with my worldview a little bit. And then around that time, I started going into, okay, so if this is true, what else can be true? Like anything can be true. So I went a little bit into like what I call a new age phase. And I'm just putting a lot of different things into the same name. Aleister Crowley and Thelema and Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry and a bunch of stuff together, jumping from one thing to the other. And after a couple of years, I'm keeping this really short because it's just a transition period. But after a couple of years, I was like, yeah, this is also nonsense. And I remember one of the moments in which I figure like this is nonsense, and is that those things are all like it's a knowledge that is only for the initiated. It's not, which made me feel very special. So it's not in the open. So you have to come here, have to study hard. So lots of things in this thing spoke to me. You have to come here, have to study hard, you have to practice this, and then you get initiated in the first level, and the second level, and the third level, and the fourth level, and then you're going to acquire like this mysterious knowledge. So I was very skeptical, but at the same time, I was like, what can I do? And I also started having, around this time, I started having voluntarily out-of-body experiences, right? And so I had this hypnosis moment, and sometimes I would fall asleep, and I would wake up out in my room, but like floating outside of my body. And I could not put those things together. So I was essentially like, okay, so I'm still like, I don't know what I am anymore. And I think I should give this thing a chance. And it is asking me for patience. So I'm going to be patient. That's what I did. But then I remember like I was in this order that I was initiated. So there was those rituals that I would go to like every Sunday, almost like a church in a sense. And you had this stuff that you had to do part of the ritual at home. Like they would give you like the material because in the solitude of, they had all those weird terms for that I don't remember.
Yeah, it does sound a lot like a church.
Yeah. So you do those things in this ritual in the altar that you set up in your own home in complete solitude, just you. And then when you're done with that, you go to this temple and you do this thing with other people. And that was the fourth level. And I was already like, yeah, I don't think none of this is real. Like none of those innate powers that you think I would develop, that I develop any of that. Just that's right, but here I am. In this ritual, you're supposed to pick a piece of paper from a bowl, like 2 pieces of paper. So you would write down a bunch of words, and the words were there, like write down those words, cut down a piece of paper, then put it in a bowl. And then you do those ritual, you do like those incantations, and you pull 2 pieces of paper. And those pieces of paper are apparently very consequential because they tell you something about your personality. And this is the name that you're going to adopt in this order now. Like you're going to be known as this name that is yours, which is the combination of those 2 secret words. And the spirit or whatever will guide you to pick the things that so this is revealing something about you. And then the first thought in my mind is that, okay, then I'm going to do this 5 times. and I'm going and like I was not supposed to do it because you're supposed to pick one, and this is something about your personality. But I say, if this is telling me something about my personality, I will pick this 5 times, and I will pick, if not the same word, like very similar words, because this is telling me something about my personality. And man, like every time I drew those papers were completely different things. So this is essentially just random. And I was already on the edge. And I was probably around 20 something at the time. So back to atheism. So like, yeah, man. This is not, and then from 20 to 35, it was just like I'm an atheist, and that's it.
Wow, that is, so this is like you said, a transitional period for you where you were just kind of exploring a couple things, and so you're in your atheist bubble, you kind of poke out for a second, and then you're like, no, never mind, coming back into my bubble for the next decade and a half.
15 years, pretty much.
Yeah, wow.
Give or take.
So I think the most remarkable part of what you talked about was that hypnosis experience. Have you ever reconciled that experience, and what do you think of that now?
Well, I still don't believe we have past lives we can go back to through the process of hypnosis. But if you go read about it, like I think hypnosis is it's pretty standard. I actually did hypnotherapy a couple of years back. Didn't work because of just I mean, maybe I was inoculated. But like hypnosis seems to be just something that you can do, like just a
Yeah.
feature of your brain, right? Just I don't ascribe any meaning to the out of body experiences. I think they're more
Mm.
complicated.
Yeah.
I had one at age 9, and man, this is the most traumatic. Not fear, because I mean fear. This hypnosis thing is really just despair. But the most, I don't know if I should even go there. Up to you. You're the host. But like the most traumatic experience in my life was around when I was 9, and as a result of that, out of the trauma, I had an out of body experience, but never again.
Mm.
And then when I was playing with those things that started like with hypnosis, and then I started reading like those occult things, then I started naturally having like those out of body experiences all the time. So this messed up with my mind a little bit because the hypnosis pulled the thread. But I think what really, again, this was so long ago, but what really, first of all, the influence of my friends, they were all into this kind of stuff. But also like those out of body experiences that I was having didn't fit with the with the mental model that I had of the world, right? It just didn't
Yeah.
fit.
Yeah. It's supernatural.
So I was like, look, if this is not like if I was wrong about this, then I don't want to be prescriptive now. I don't want to assume what is right and what is wrong. I think I just want to be open. And I think as I became open, I went into this thing in which I was too open, and I accepted a lot of stuff that today I don't consider real. And it took me a couple of years to figure that out. But
Yeah, yeah. Well, that makes sense. You reminded me, my brother was actually hypnotized in a show,
yeah,
and did all sorts of crazy things. And he's, yeah, I don't think I would ever submit to something like that now. Nope, no thanks. So, yeah, very interesting. Okay, so you're 35 now. It's been a decade and a half since you really explored anything
Mhm.
outside of atheism, and there's something, I guess, that changed in your life that made you
Yeah.
poke outside of that atheist bubble again. What was that?
More or less, there was one event, there was one thing that happened that I, again, did not even pay attention to. But in retrospect, was important. So I'm going to mention it to you. I lived in Russia for 5 years. And then when I was coming back from Russia, I met a friend of mine. And this friend of mine had his friend, that I did not know and never met again. So don't even remember his name. But we were chatting about religion, and one of them was Catholic, and the other one was an Orthodox Christian. And I'm chatting with them, and I'm there like just say, hey, good luck believing the kind of nonsense. I mean, this is all false. And I'm coming from this atheist position in which those things are not falsifiable. That's the word I use, and I still I'm saying, look, you're making those claims. You're making the claim that this works this way, that this works that way. There is nothing I can do. I was reading a lot of Popper at the time as well, which is part of the reason I went in for those words in particular.
Mm-hmm.
There is nothing I can do to verify that after you die you're going to heaven. Like you're making a claim, and I can't verify it. It's impossible to verify. Therefore, it's non-falsifiable, and it's so cultural. Like you have Hindus, and you have Muslims, and then you Christians. Like, and it's just something that you guys made up with because we need those stories, and none of this is falsifiable. And I think what I was expecting was just a defense of like why this is not important, and why some defense of against the general idea. And what he told me is that you are right. Religions are not falsifiable, except one, and that one is Christianity. And the reason Christianity is falsifiable is that if you go read the letter to the Romans, St. Paul says, look, we are here, we're gathered here, and I'm terrible at quoting stuff verbatim. So if you're better than me, just feel free to put the quote in there. And also, like, different translations translate differently anyway. So I stopped caring that I'm not as good at remembering things verbatim. But we're gathered here today because Jesus Christ rose from the dead. And if he didn't, we're all fools. And we're worse than fools, because like we're spending our whole life around this thing that's false. And if he didn't raise from the dead, we're fools. And my reaction was like, finally, we agree on something. I think you guys are fools. And he was unabated. He was just like, yeah, think whatever. Because I think the idea, like, if I analyze my thought process at the time, because a lot of things, they only become clear in hindsight when you look back, right? If I look back at that, I think what was going on in my mind is that, yeah, like if there was something that could disprove this, all religious figures would do the best they can to hide, to avoid, to, right? And like, so you wouldn't be able to falsify any of that. And I had this, like, but the Catholic Church hid this in secret and did this other thing and this other thing and blah, 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 blah. Which again, today, I feel almost ashamed that I view things this way. But I think the view that I had is that, like, yeah, I mean, you are fools, because nobody who is a religious person would ever look into those things that deeply out of fear of having their worldview completely turned around. Because if they were to look into those claims deeply, like, they would abandon it, because it's, so you're telling me that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. Fine. Conceptually, epistemologically, I agree with you that this is at least falsifiable, right? Just because he either did or he didn't.
Yeah, especially 3 days later.
Yeah, but nobody would ever look into those things out of fear of, like, destroying this worldview. If there was anything, so in practice, it doesn't matter. And I brushed it off. I said, like, that doesn't mean anything, and boom, right? Just so again, this was just one afternoon. I do not even remember this. This never came back in my life or in my mind. It was out of mind for me. I don't think I can tell you. I can come up with a couple of theories. I don't think I can tell you why exactly I started looking into it. I think it was a mixture of many things. One of them, my absolute love for the Roman Empire, which is a subject that I always like. And recently I found out I'm not the only one, but I thought that I was the only one that was this obsessed with the Roman Empire. Yeah. And the fact that I had my first kid. So my mom she wanted me to baptize my kid, just out of, why wouldn't you? I mean, it's just thing, just do it. Even if you don't believe it, I mean, just do it. I just refused to do it because I said, like, no way. And I think I had some sense in which, look, I don't think I like the world we live in now, in terms of values, in terms of culture. Like, I think that when you took religion out of the culture, a lot of things broke. Not that some things didn't get better, but some things broke. And I think I started as I aged, I started appreciating those things and regretting, like, how atomized we are today, how not resilient we are today compared to, like, the generation that fought World War I, World War II. And at the peak of my atheist phase, I think I attributed all the problems in the world to religion, because that's some things that atheists usually do. Oh, you see, you're all fighting religious wars, holy wars. But as I matured and as I aged, I started attributing those things to humans. And it's what I said the other day, like, you pick the Twitter fight of the day, like Git versus not Git. Imagine that whoever wins this discussion gains a lot of influence and power. And now you give both sides of this discussion state-level arsenals. You're gonna have a war, like, right? Just and I think I saw the 20th century, the experiments of, like, let's take God out of the equation. like it was done in the Soviet Union, like it was done in China, and like we're doing now? And is the world getting better? And in some of those places, I think it's in the West. You could argue that, like, yeah, materially, yes. In the Soviet Union, I think it just got worse. And like, did they get more? Did it get more peaceful? No. Did they get more humane? No. Right? Did it get nicer? No. So I think I became amenable to the idea that maybe religion is a force for good. But that put me in a conundrum, because I was incapable, as I would tell myself, I was incapable of lying. So I had a couple of friends with whom I shared this at the time. They would tell me, "Man, just join a church, just go, but I don't believe any of that. Like, but it doesn't matter. And it just wasn't something that I was willing to do. And I was reading a lot of Nietzsche at the time as well. You will notice that this is something that I always like to do. I have very little time today running the company to do this, but I used to read a lot. And Nietzsche had this idea, he famously declared that God is dead and we killed him. And what a lot of people misunderstand about Nietzsche is that people sometimes think he was saying that in a celebratory tone because he was not a very religious person. So, he's celebrating that God is dead. And no, he wasn't. It was essentially like, God is dead and we killed him. But what is going to take the space? And he predicted this world in which we're going to be alternating between nihilism and totalitarianism. And he felt very prescient of him, looking at our history from the 20th century to today. It seems like we're always bouncing between those two things in some level, if not socially, at least like internally.
Yeah.
And then the solution that Nietzsche essentially gives you is that you need to become the Übermensch, which is like the man that comes after, like the post-religious man. So I think you put those things together, like my interest in philosophy that never died. That was the one thing that I kept with me throughout this whole history. And then like this idea that, man, I'm having a son now, and how am I going to raise this son? This idea that I need to find the Nietzschean solution of like the value system that will put, and I started understanding that if this very idea of like, I just don't like lying, came from my religious upbringing. Even and now we go back to the culture thing. Like, even though those people around me were not true Catholics, they didn't believe any of that. They would claim they did, but they didn't really, because they were making offers to this African goddess in New Year's. Like, but it created this culture where lying is wrong. And when you look at the world, this is not to be taken for granted. There are many cultures, and we have this tendency today to say, no, everybody is equal. No, we're not all equal. There are many cultures in which child sacrifice is good. There are many cultures in which lying for the right reasons is not acceptable. It's good. And I started seeing that a lot of the things that I had, so that was cultural. Like, I started seeing that a lot of the things that I had that I liked about me were religious in essence. So I had this conflict inside of me that said, yeah, I admit now that this created a world that I would rather live in than the world we're walking towards today. But if that was built on a lie, so be it. The West deserves it. We deserve, if our society collapses, so be it. We're going to build a new one on top of something true. If you build, this is what you get. That was what I thought at the time. This is what you get by building this your great cultural society on a lie. It will crumble because it was false. So I embarked. There is a comment here. I'm just gonna pop out on the screen. What are we discussing here? I guess. What are we discussing here?
Yeah, I was just about to respond to that comment, but yeah, we're here on the Save File talking with Glauber about his story of your relationship with Christianity throughout your life.
That's the
So
summary.
right now, you are at around 35 years old,
Yeah.
and getting into possibly looking into Christianity again.
Yeah. And so what I decided to do, is like, okay, so I get it. Like we there are good things that come out of it. I will try. I mean, I just had a kid. It increased my sense of urgency because this was something that I kind of understood. But like I said,
Yeah,
I need to find the value system that I'm gonna raise my kid into.
yeah. If people want a life hack for
Yeah,
becoming a better person, get married and have children.
that works. But here's the thing. Here's the thing that I was not willing to do. I was not willing to lie, not to
Yeah,
myself, not to others. I was not willing to like go to a church or like some people are telling me to do. And I actually felt that as a society, we deserved it because we built this value system that we had on a lie. So let it die, and we're going to build a new one on top. And because I just had a kid, I had this sense of urgency. I said, man, what if I am the one that finds it? Like people have been trying since Nietzsche, but like I got to take a step. And I started looking at the history of the early church. My goal in looking at the history of the early church was like, okay, I grant you guys, you built something great. I want you to understand what was it that was special. Like that there was something here that you guys got right. I want to understand what is it that you got right that allow you to build our society and our value system despite the lie that you put in the center of this, right? And then I went into this journey. And look, happy to go into the details, but again, I love the Roman Empire. So for me, it was a pleasure to go read the history of the early church, which is something I never, like people talk about the Catholic Church in the 16th century, in the 17th century, and Pope Borgia and Galileo and this and that, which I revisited later and learned a lot of new things as well. But like I never truly had looked at the history of the early church. I've never looked at the history of the people in the first century. And then I never looked before in the history of like, okay, so here's the Bible. Did the Bible fall from the sky? No. Like those books were composed by people. Who were those people? What were they doing? How does that compare to other historical documents? Like, how do we know the things that we know? And again, I'm happy to go into any particular detail that you think is interesting. But my conclusion after, I think, around 1 year of studying this almost every day, the only answer that was reasonable, because you can find other answers that are possible. They're possible. But the only answer I found that was reasonable of how could you build what you build on top of this lie is that it wasn't a lie. Is that people who die tend to stay dead. But this one time it didn't happen. And this was a historical fact. And at that moment, I think those words that this person that I never met again spoke to me came into my mind like, we're here because Jesus Christ rose from the dead. And if he didn't, we're all fools. He did. And then that moment, again, I wasn't Catholic at the time, but that's where, and this started a process, but I became
You're
after
open. You were Christian at that point. Yeah. Wow. That's really powerful. And I like your framing that like this is Occam's razor. The simplest answer is the right one, and the simplest answer is that like it would be just so difficult to build something lasting on a lie, and so rather, what if it's not a lie? And that's the simpler answer.
Yeah, but again, for me, it wasn't like that's how they build it. As I started trying to understand, I found some things that I never came into contact before, and I found some things that I knew before. I was just put in a completely different light. And let's read some comments here, and then because you cannot put them on the screen, but like after some episodes, I started hopefully from the podcast, I started listening to Christianity for people who aren't Christians. Uncommon answers to common questions from James Emery White. Very relatable to the things chatted here. The fact that if it's not true, who cares, right? So I guess in agreement with what we're seeing here.
Yeah, that actually makes me think of what Aaron said a couple weeks ago, Aaron Francis on the episode where he said, listen, like there are so many things in the Bible that when taken literally are pretty wild, but the most wild thing of all of them is that Jesus was crucified and rose again 3 days later. And if that thing is true, then like the rest of it, maybe it's up to interpretation, or maybe it all is literally true, but it doesn't actually matter because the most important thing is true.
Yeah, and look, I'm as I shared in the past, I am not a very experiential person. So for me, this is still a very rational process. With, by the way, maybe one exception. I'll gladly share this exception later. I was thinking about, I think I should tell you that, but keeping this experience, like this thing about rationality on. And I think the message that I have for people today is exactly this. I mean, like that you can be a fully rational person and go investigate. Like what crossed my mind when I spoke to this guy, yeah, nobody's going to look into that very seriously. How far from the truth could I ever be? Because like people investigate this all the time. And look, do you have proof that Jesus rose from the dead? No. Depending on how you want to use the word proof. Because look, if you talk to a mathematician, even the physicists don't have proof for anything, right? Because like they use the word proof in such a strict sense. But then you go talk to a physicist, like does anybody that is not running an experiment have proof for anything? No. But look, do you have any proof that Napoleon Bonaparte tried to conquer Europe? Like, can you run an experiment to prove that it's wrong? No. But you have another method to look into history. So when you look into history, and this is one of the first things that I had to do, when you look into history, you first need to understand how is it that you look into history. So you're not gonna. And one of the things that did it for me is I'll share that, and then there's another comment. But one of the final things, like the straw that broke the camel's back, is I was very proud of the fact that I don't assume things. I just go where the evidence leads me. And then I'm talking to you after being presented with all of this evidence, and then I start digging, and then I start looking after it, and then I start looking after it, and then I start looking after it, and then I learn things like, for example, the best document we have for Alexander the Great, the best historical document that we have for Alexander the Great was written more than 500 years after Alexander the Great.
Wow.
We don't have any contemporaries. Nobody knows that. I mean, nobody knows that. A lot of people that, but I do not know that. Like, we don't have any contemporary sources for Alexander the Great. We don't have any contemporary sources for Hannibal Barca, the crossing of the Alps. Like, we know nothing of those things, but we have contemporary sources for Jesus at the time saying this man was here, did this, and that. Most of it ended in the Bible. But again, the argument that people use is that those are only Christian sources. Yeah, but they weren't Christian sources at the time. They were, they were just
like what other sources are there going to be?
Are you asking me to find the source of a man that saw this guy rise from the dead and did not become a Christian? Is that what you're asking me? Because that sounds pretty wild,
like
right?
if there was a firsthand source like that, then it probably would have ended up in the Bible as well.
Exactly. Well, no, not necessarily, because there's a lot of, and this is like C.S. Lewis, as the comment shows here, came to the same conclusion. You had another person who looked into that deeply. So you look at the historical sources. I found like the letters of Paul, for me, are the most compelling evidence to the truth of Christianity, because they were written in before or at the year 50, like so 20 years after the death of Jesus. All of those people that he's talking about are still alive. You can go ask them. I mean, if you think like, and if this was a religion that was not giving anybody trouble, you could say, yeah, sure. I mean, but nobody bothered to look. But man, this was the thorn on the Roman Empire. Like, this was the thorn on the Roman Empire, and nobody thought about, yeah, just go find this lady Mary and get her to recant and say that her son was not this. Could you do this? No, because Mary was alive, right?
Yeah.
Go find Peter and go ask him like if those things are, and getting to recant. They actually found Peter and they killed him.
Yeah.
and he would not, and he would not, because he wouldn't recant. And again, the thing about the letters of Paul for me are so powerful is not the contents of the letter. And this is what I think people misunderstand about my position. There's nothing in the contents of the letter, which is the one thing that I say, oh, you see, because he wrote this, that what makes the letters of Paul so powerful to me is the fact that he wrote them at all. Because think of what they are. They are a letter that he is writing to an existing church. And what that tells you is that 20 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus, the church already existed. The writings about the church come later, 20 years after the fact, but the church spawns immediately after. And then he is codifying, because if you read the letters of Paul, which I'm sure you did, and I'm sure even a lot of atheists did, like I did at the time, and with a different context, you will see that what he's doing is that he's not trying to convince you of anything.
Yeah.
He is like, you're already convinced, you're here, but you're having trouble in Corinth, and here's how I would handle this trouble that you're having, right?
Yeah, just logistics.
It's logistics to a existing entity. Like, so Jesus Christ dies, and the next day, pretty much, the church exists. So for me, this is one of the killing arguments, and I had this pride in myself of like, I'm going to go where the evidence leads me. But after looking at all this evidence, I was not convinced. I was not convinced because extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And then a friend of mine who later became the sponsor of my confirmation when I got confirmed in the Catholic Church later, he asked me this question that later I found that was asked of many people. I do not know, but okay, Glauber, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Extraordinary evidence. What evidence do you want? What do you want to see? Like, you've seen all of this. What else do you need? Tell me. Just voice it. And this is an exercise that I would incentivize people to do, because when you do this, you realize that, and what I realized, I'm not claiming that everybody, of course, will come to the same conclusion. But what I realized at the time is that I was really just, I was an atheist at that point because I wanted to, because there was no evidence, like without this guy telling me, hey, stop, right, and think, what evidence do you want? What evidence would convince you? What reasonable evidence would convince you? Don't bring out, no time travels, no pictures, like, and we actually, in fact, we do have a picture of Jesus, but we can go that later. But what evidence would convince you that this is real? And when I thought about it, I was like, and I kept thinking about it, and I realized that, look, I had enough evidence. You're never going to run an experiment, because that's not how history works. And the claim here is that this is a historical fact. Do I have evidence for heaven and hell? No. Can I run an experiment about that? No. But I do have evidence that this incredibly improbable historical event happened. And at that point, I was like, look, I remember telling my wife, this is true. I think this happened. And I don't think we can keep living our lives the same way anymore. Because for a while you have inertia. For a while you have like this inertia of like, yeah, this is just a fact. But as it settles, it's like, God walked the earth. And he told us what he wants out of us. So I have to listen. What are my choices? Like, either I don't believe it which is fine. I can say I've seen all of this evidence and I decided to just say I don't believe it. But if I truly believe it, like I can't just sit on it. Like my whole life has to change. And this is the moment where I decided, okay, now I have to do something with that, right, Justin?
Yeah, so something that I find interesting is that there were people who had even greater evidence than you have now of the reality of Jesus Christ. People who lived during his time and rejected him anyway, and you are more committed to Jesus than they are. And they saw him; they were with him. I don't know how you could have more evidence. They saw that he was resurrected. All of that. So my question is, what is it about your conversion to the Savior Jesus Christ? Because I know it's not just the evidence. There's something that's deeper for you. You were converted to Jesus not because a church spawned up immediately after his resurrection, but because of something deeper. And I want to hear more about that.
If there is something deeper, I'm truly unaware of it. And Kent, one thing I share with you when you're the guest on my podcast is that I'm not a very experiential person. In fact, now that I'm converted, let's say, I keep praying to God that, man, give me the experiences, right? Just because it's so many people report this connection with Christ is what you should be seeking, and I don't have it. I truly don't have it. And there are a couple of things that I can say about it. I think too much. I think a lot. This story.
Not too much.
But I don't know if this is true or not. I'm not claiming this is true, right? But the other day, thinking about it, I was like, okay, so maybe the reason I'm like this is that God wants me as an example to other rational people. And if I would come here with a lot of those experiential things, it would ruin it. Just maybe
disregarded.
Maybe, but it kind of sucks because I want those experiences, and I think in a lot of ways I am this emotionally broken person through my childhood and all that. And look, I would love to have this loving relationship that people report, and I just don't. Not in a way that I can feel. I mean, I understand that loving relationship is there in the sense that God is guiding my life, and in some sense, but I don't feel it. There is one thing. And this is, and I wanted to share that. I don't even know why, but I figure, like, man, when I talk to Kent, I think I want to share that story. I've heard many stories about people claiming things about the Christian faith in the past, right? We live we're heirs to a Christian tradition, but I just thought they were all false, and today I think one of them is, some of them are, I still think they're false. Some things that people claim throughout the ages, I think they're just false. And some things I think they're true. Like, so they truly did happen, and miraculous things. And just a parenthesis here, after this, I actually told a friend of mine, and many friends of mine, but I don't believe in miracles. I believe in one miracle. So the view that I had of the world is like God created the world, the universe, and everything, put us in here, and by and large, as Spinoza's God, like God doesn't interfere except this one time. Now, I don't view this anymore because I found more evidence later for other miracles that I'm happy to talk about. But for many years, until recently, until like a year ago, I had this view in which, like, I have evidence for this one miracle. Don't ask me for more than that. But there is a story that, looking back, gave me goosebumps. That for me is more than I'm used to, right? So this is maybe I find this consequential. I'm not claiming this is true because I had goosebumps, especially for the atheists in the audience, right? That's not what I'm claiming. In fact, I'm not claiming anything. I'm really just reporting, and then we can chat about it. I'm going to say it anyway because people in the audience will not be familiar, but are you familiar with the vision of Pope Leo XIII?
That does sound familiar, but let's hear about it.
Well, and again, this has nothing to do with me becoming Catholic. It wasn't because of that. Just there's nothing to do with that. But this is a story that, looking back, it was like my mental process was like the hypnosis one. Outwardly, I'm telling, what a load of nonsense. But inside, I'm feeling something. And again, there are no claims of truth stemming out of this, but this is just so unusual for me because I'm not a feelings-based person. And that story gave me goosebumps. And here's the story. Like Pope Leo the 13th, and I understand that the Protestants are going to get mad at it because it's a Pope and just all of that, but what can I do? So reportedly, Pope Leo the 13th finishes celebrating Mass, and then for a minute or two, he goes pale, he looks terrified, and then he falls down to the ground after Mass, right? Apparently this is true. This happened because people saw him there, and like there are eyewitnesses that took the Pope, and the Pope was like in this catatonic state, looking at the ceiling and like completely pale, and was removed from church back to his room. But the interesting thing is why. Which again, do I have any evidence except for the fact that the Pope said so that this is true? No, but he claims that when he was walking through that place, he heard two voices, one very deep and one very gentle. And then when he looked up, he saw the Lord Jesus Christ talking to Satan in a scene that is reminiscent of the book of Job. Satan tells Jesus in this very guttural, deep voice, if I had more power and if I had more time, I could destroy your church. And then Jesus responds in a very calm and soft voice, how much power? How much time? And then he says, 100 years and more power over the ones that would give themselves to me. And I'm terrible at quoting stuff verbatim. And then Jesus responds, you will have the power, you have the time, do your best. Something along those lines. And even as I am telling that story right now, I'm feeling goosebumps. And what do I make of it? I don't know. Again, I don't think me feeling goosebumps makes this truer or falser.
Mm-hmm.
There is a niche community online that likes that story and loves to debate what is the starting point of the 100 years, and then there's it's World War II and it's this and it's that, or it could be just false, right? But except for the fact that this story gives me goosebumps, for me this is purely rational. I don't find anything within myself that, again, there's my son, but it's not in the sense that my son ended up being baptized, but he was almost a year old because, so it was already eventually late in the process. My two daughters, when they were born, I baptized them right away. But this is still a very, very rational thing to me. I look at those things and I am convinced after looking that the most probable explanation, and here, there's, for those who are interested, go look online. I mean, and I'm happy to chat more with the people who want, but I'm not going to go do an explanation. There are books about it, like what are those things and what is the historical evidence. But after I look at the evidence for a whole year, I was like, look, I don't see any other explanation. It's either this or an alien or time travel, and at this point, man, just.
Well, I think that your story of finding your way out of Christianity, then playing around with things a little bit, staying in your atheist bubble, and then getting out again when life had a lot more meaning, having a family and everything, is just really, and like your level of dedication in research and study is very inspiring to me. I just think that it's like that certainly took a great deal of effort. It sounds like you were very intentional, that you wanted to live intentionally and not like you often say that you don't want to live a lie. And I just, as evidenced by your story, that's very true for you. Like you really want to live your life in line with what reality is, and you'll do everything that you can to establish that reality, which I just think is very commendable.
Commendable. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
fantastic.
and it is a similar path that took me to the Catholic Church, and I think this is where we're gonna finally, because now you've been playing the devil's advocate. I think for your best, but you're not a Catholic, so I'm hoping we're gonna disagree on this for real. But like
Mm,
me coming to the Catholic Church was a similar process, because I look at, and when I was looking into this history, like the conclusion for me is that early church was the Catholic Church. And now it's not the same Catholic Church that we have today. And like, again, my first instinct is like, okay, and keep in mind, I mean, I'm still learning and I'm still studying and I'm still unearthing new things. But my first reaction is like, which of the many Protestant churches I will join, and or should I become a Mormon? Or I told you I had this aunt that was a Mormon,
mhm.
and or I called a couple of friends. Hey, you're Baptist. I mean, tell me more about it. Like, or should I be like a Episcopalian, or just or
This is
what? Right?
very consistent with the rest of your story. Just like, okay, now that
Yeah,
I have this thing I need to do, I'm going to research everything I possibly
exactly.
can.
Yeah. And then like some people like give me trouble for this. That you didn't look at everything. You didn't look at Islam and say, look, but I'm coming to this from the point of view of like Jesus rose from the dead. The Quran
Mhm.
claims that it didn't happen, so they're wrong. I'm sorry. Like just um, I'm not gonna. I don't need to look further. I mean, I already discarded. Like I just
Mm.
you didn't look. You didn't look at Judaism. I said that. In fact, I did. My wife was thinking about becoming Jewish, and at about the same time for other reasons. Like she felt a connection. She always felt a strong connection. And one of the arguments that I used before was like, Judaism is actually great. Let me tell you the story about this one Jew, right? That his name was Jesus. Just, but like as we were discerning this together. But look, I having pruned a bunch of stuff that I just wasn't going to look at, because this whole thing for me was centered in the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. I look into everything you can think of. I mean, if I forgot one or two, I might have forgotten. That's fine. Didn't get to it, but like I looked at everything I could lay my hands on. And the ultimate conclusion that I got into is that, look, Jesus, and I think this you will agree with me, Jesus didn't leave us a book. He left us a church. He came here and he told Peter, I think this my Portuguese speaking background does help, because there is some discussion if Peter really means rock. And like, I'm sorry, it means rock, because Portuguese is a Latin language. So for me as a Portuguese speaker, is 100% obvious that Petros means the rock, right? So Jesus leaves a church in this rock, a church that is already in existence the very next day. Not the very next day, but like in historical terms, the very next day. And that church has bishops and priests and all of that. And is that in the Bible? No, because the Bible is still being written. But if you read Tertullian, you will see it. If you read Justinian, you will see it. If you read Origen, you will see it. If you read Clement of Rome, you will see it. Like if you read the Didache, you will see it. Like the Didache talks about baptism the way Catholics do it today. It doesn't say, by the way, that this is preferred method of baptism, but it says it is acceptable, right? Which is one of the things that in clear terms. And the Didache it takes you an hour to read. I recommend anybody go look the Didache. It is one of the earliest There were many discussions at the time. There were many discussions whether or not the Didache should be included in the Bible, because the canon of Scripture, as you all should know, didn't fall from the sky. One day, this group of folks sat down and said what goes in and what goes out. And most books were undisputed. They clearly go in. But the book of Revelation was disputed. It ended up coming in. I mean, it was very easy to imagine a future in which the book of Revelation was not part of the Bible. As we have a future today in which the Didache is not part of the Bible. But it was disputed at the time. People were discussing, should we include this in the Bible or not? And the fact that it wasn't included doesn't mean it's false. It just means like it doesn't match the criteria that we're using to select the books on the Bible, which is, was it written by apostles? The Didache was not written by apostles. Nobody knows who wrote it, so it doesn't go in. But it is a document that was used in the early church. So in Clement of Rome, Origen, Tertullian, Justinian, you read all of those folks, and you see Justin Martin. It's not Justinian that I have in mind, it's Justin Martin. And you read all of those folks who were the folks that, again, Jesus dies, leaves the apostles in charge. The apostles pass this on to this other group of people that come after. Now, when you read the apostles and when you read this other group of people, the impression that I had, and again, I know many people would disagree with me, nothing I can do about it. The impression that I have is that there is a church there. And that church is what I came to believe, that church was not a conceptual church in the sense that like all the people who believe in Jesus. No, it was a institutional church with bishops, with priests, with deacons, like in doing things in the way we do it today by and large. And I came to the conclusion that because of unfortunate politics, that church is split in two in 1054. So I believe that both the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church have a claim of being this initial church that was there, that Jesus left us. And this is not to say that I think that Protestants are going to hell, or like, in fact, they appreciate Protestants a lot, because they provide, like, first of all, I've never met people who know the Bible more than Protestants do, and that's fantastic. It's fascinating. The stories, like this idea, something that the Protestants say that, Catholics worship Mary. This is not true if you ask the Catholic Church, which is the authority on what the Catholic Church believes or not. But if you go ask Catholic people, if you go ask people in the street in Brazil, for example, they are 100% worshiping Mary, like 100%. Like I grew up with that. Like and my family, like they would say those things and say, "Oh, pray to the saint, and the saint is going to help you." No, he will not, right? And I like the fact that Protestantism puts a cultural counterpoint to that, because this is absurd. No, the saint is not going to help you. I do think Mary is special, but she's not goddess. She's not, she's not the Trinity. She didn't create the universe or anything like that, right? And again, I think Protestants are right about that, because regardless of what the church says, the people in the culture will do their own thing, and they have their own beliefs, and those things get corrupted. So I mean, I fully appreciate that, but for me, looking historically at those things, I came to this conclusion. And at that moment, I had a cultural choice. I said, if true looking at the church fathers, I believe there was a church in there. I don't believe this was a conceptual group of believers. I think this was a church, a institution. That institution broke in two, the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. My only choice, as much as I hate it, and this is the thing where I would like to connect to the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, the cultural, yeah.
I struggle with that, man. I struggle because it's like, fine, just I'm gonna go be Orthodox then. That's just the only thing. But the thing that kept me away from the Orthodox Church is that they are very cultural. Like, there is no Orthodox Church. I cannot go today and knock at the door of an Orthodox Church. I live in Canada, and then there's the Greek Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the Serbian Orthodox Church. Like, they all came to the New World, and they kept their cultural identities intact. And I don't think there's anything metaphysically wrong with that, but I don't think now culturally I fit in this mode, because I'm going to show up. I'm going to show up at the Serbian Orthodox Church. I'm not Serbian, right? I don't have any cultural connection to this. I'm going to show up at the Greek Orthodox Church. I'm not Greek. Like, so how do I fit in this? Like, and there are people who overcome this and pick one of them and go be a part of this. But like, that was something I had cultural, not theological or anything like that. I had a cultural problem with. And then I said, hey, look, I mean, if I think I don't fit in this thing culturally, and through my studies, I came to the conclusion that this church split in two, and they are, This is where I think you're going to disagree. You think that this church ceased to exist and was recreated later by Joseph Smith. I see no evidence of this happening. Right? I see evidence on the contrary. I see evidence of continuity. In fact, lots of people say, yeah, but the Catholic Church became the Roman Empire and was co-opted by the Roman Empire. Of course he was. Of course he was. Remember what the Jews were expecting of the Messiah. Lots of Jews at the time did not accept Jesus and don't accept Jesus to today because the Messiah was supposed to be a conqueror that would conquer the Roman Empire like the Catholic Church did. The Catholic Church conquered the Roman Empire, and then, of course, it became the Roman Empire because it conquered the empire not through the sword, but through the power of Jesus Christ, right? And that is what put me in this path, because that is what I wanted to understand. How did you guys build this on a lie? And then what I came to believe is that not only this wasn't a lie, but the ultimate promise that the Jews reject, that the Messiah would conquer, was in fact fulfilled. And this is the Catholic Church.
Wow, I'd never actually thought about that perspective before. That's very interesting that he did actually do that.
He did do that.
Yeah, it's
so
fascinating.
is your objection that he wasn't the Messiah because he was supposed to conquer? He did.
Yeah.
The Roman Empire, the most powerful empire on the planet, was now the church. In a different way. I mean, it's not the same empire, but like it conquered the empire, and it grew. After this empire collapsed, the only thing left standing was the church, which I'm not gonna call the Catholic Church today, because they say it was both the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church in one. And it's a shame that they separated. I think it's ridiculous. I mean, it's just, that is politics, and God allows it for his reason. I'm not going to question him. I didn't create the universe. I barely created a database. But like, I wish they would become one again, right? But my conclusion after looking at this was like, hey, look, Jesus is real. Jesus came back from the dead. Jesus conquered the Roman Empire like the prophecies were promising, and which is why they just didn't accept him. And that church that he left us is the Catholic Church. So after this, and it's not to say that I don't have any problems with the church anymore. I do. There are things that I still don't accept. Some things that I found ridiculous before today, I through this process of investigation, I fully accept. And this was around this was around 3 years ago. 3 to 4 years ago, in which I just decided to show up at my local Catholic church, get married because I wasn't married in the church. Through this process, like, my wife was on the verge. She was like, yeah, and sounds like it, but and then I baptized my kid. My kid is 5 now. I mean, he was already almost 1 when we did this. We did it like almost in the same weekend. We got married, then we baptized our first kid the week after. And I've been going to church pretty much every Sunday since then.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that story. That your dedication to finding evidence and ability to do the research to find that is commendable. Like I said earlier, I think it's awesome. So I am curious. It sounds like for you, membership of the Catholic Church isn't actually you would be just as happy technically as a member of an Orthodox church as you are in the Catholic Church, because to you they're basically the same.
Historically and theologically, yes. Culturally, probably not, right? But which is what, at the end of the day, I said, look, even though I dislike Brazil, the Catholic Church is much larger than Brazil, and then you look at the history. I'm a Western man, and like I culturally identify with this. But that's the only part. That's the only part of the story where culture played the role in my final decision.
Yeah,
this is fully cultural to me. In fact, I think there are things that in the Orthodox Church that are a lot better. But just their things.
So it's my understanding that Protestant faiths branch from the Catholic Church in various ways. They all have their own
Hmm.
origin stories. So what I'm curious about then is what is your holdup on Protestant faiths, since they also branch
Yeah.
just like the Orthodox do?
Well, the Orthodox didn't branch; they split, which is a
Okay.
different thing. Like, so you have this one church, and they both believe the same things because they are one unified church. And then at some point, for political reasons, Pope, the Pope in Rome, because what a lot of people don't understand about the Pope is that the Pope is just a bishop, right? The Pope is the Bishop of Rome. That's his original title.
Hmm.
The Orthodox Church has, like, you have the Bishop of Antioch, the Bishop of Constantinople, like or the Patriarch, as they would call it today. So you have this group of bishops, and the Catholics believe, and this is, I think, one of the only things that there's the filioque thing as well, which I don't think it matters here, but like the main thing is that the Orthodox today, and I think this is mostly political, don't view that the Pope has final authority over the other bishops, and the Pope believes he does because he is he's not the only one. Yeah, yes, you're all bishops and you're all apostolic and you're all descendant from the apostles, but Jesus gave this to Peter. So the successor of Peter is the Pope. Again, because he's the Bishop of Rome, because Peter became the first Bishop of Rome, and just for no other reason other than that. So because of this political thing, they split. Now, Protestants, and I don't want to misrepresent Protestants here, and first of all, there are many kinds of Protestants. Protestants differ theologically, so it's a different thing. Like Protestants, historically you have to understand that, like, the West and the East were very separate at the time. So Constantinople is doing its own thing in the Eastern Orthodox Church, and in fact, by the time of the Protestant Reformation, they don't even exist anymore. Constantinople had fallen, so it's even less relevant than it was before. Now all there is the Catholic Church. The Protestants now show up in the West. Many Protestants today are very knowledgeable about it, but by and large, they don't engage at the time philosophically with the Orthodox Church. The Orthodox Church doesn't matter to them. They put themselves in opposition to Catholicism. And I actually think this was also political in nature to some extent, the beginning, but over time it developed theological differences. And I love your question because there are two things as I study there are two things in the Protestant faith in general that I just can't accept. There are many things that I don't agree with, but I could accept. I'll give you an example of something that I don't believe, but I could be persuaded, which is sola fide. Sola fide is the doctrine that you are saved by faith alone. You don't need works. Now, as a Catholic, I don't believe that. But I can see, I could embrace sola fide because for me, is that they're like what if you have faith in Jesus, your life will change.
Yeah.
And he will do the works.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of like what was, no Catholic believes that you need to earn your salvation.
Right.
What Catholics believe is that you are saved by Jesus through his grace. But you can, as any gift that is given to you, you can choose to accept it or you can choose to reject it. Your works is how you show that you accept it. And then you keep it in communion with in good standing with this body of believers. It's not something but if you were to say, you know what, but we had this theological debate and we're smart people, you're not, and we decided the sola fide, can I accept that? Absolutely. I think there, I don't, but like I have things in the Catholic Church that I don't accept. It would not prevent me from being Protestants. There are many things that I just don't accept. I think I have the humility today to say, hey, look, maybe I just don't understand this enough, or maybe I do, and maybe they're wrong, and that's fine. Just it's okay. It's just we're all humans. Like they're humans as well. The Pope is not God. Like the cardinals are. In fact, this Pope is very far from being God. But hope I'm not ruffling any feathers, but I could accept that. But the two things I cannot accept are the doctrine of sola scriptura, which is where most of things come from, because essentially what Protestants claim, and I think this comes from the fact that the Catholic Church became so corrupted in the beginning of the Renaissance, right? That the Protestants were, again, I'm not in their minds, but what it seems to me from the outside is that this institution became so corrupted, our defense against this corruption is the Bible alone. But I can't accept this because the church fathers did not accept it. Just those folks, they were questioned. They were questioned at the time. Like there are people like Tertullian writes about, should we look into the Bible alone, and concludes that no. Like the tradition that was handled to the apostles is also important. And Scripture tells you many things, but like it's you can interpret this way or that way. And this tradition that is handed over through the church is how you figure out if this is this or that. Right? It's true by looking at this tradition. And in fact, if I find sola scriptura quite dangerous, because like at the end of the day, this is, in a sense, it's what is behind my atheism, which is like you're claiming to me that this book, whatever this book says, I have to believe it. And this sounds to me like an outrageous claim. I mean, I believe in this because of the historical process that gave rise to this book. Now that I accept that this book is telling me that the historical parts of this book, like the Gospels and the letters of Paul, now that I believe that those things, only now I can believe the book of Revelation, right? Because I know it was written by Saint John, right?
Yeah.
I can't believe on the Bible on its merits alone. It's something very hard for me to do. So that is problem number one. And problem number two is the whole thing with the Eucharist, because and again, some Protestants, the initial Protestants, did not dispute the Eucharist. The Eucharist is the belief that for Catholics and Orthodox and Lutherans, because again, Luther was not yet at this point, the communion that you take, the bread and the wine, they're not symbols of Jesus. They are the body and blood of Jesus. They are the body and blood of Jesus. And I think this is the core of what the church is consuming that thing is the core of, or should be, the core of Christian life. And we do have evidence for this being true. The first evidence is that when Jesus claims in the Bible, in the Gospels, this is my body. He's not saying, hey, this represents my body. This looks like my body, like behave as if this was my body. He says, this is my body. Now, going back to sola scriptura, this could mean many things. And you need something else to help you decide. But still in Scripture, when Jesus says that, lots of the people who were there leave because they find this outrageous. They would not have found a symbol outrageous. They could only have found the real thing outrageous. Furthermore, the people in the first century that compiled the Bible believed that this was the real body of Christ. This was always believed until the 15th century to be the real body of Christ. And again, if you read the gospel, there's the story of like, hey, Jesus is about to die. He goes into the Last Supper, and he tells you to do this, not as a symbol. Like, this is my body. So Protestants, again, I could be Lutheran in that sense, but I could not reject the Eucharist. And might be the last thing I have time to share. I claimed later. So one thing I said is that after this, I believed in one miracle. I said, okay, we have Spinoza's God. He set the world in motion and let us be. Except for this one time. But as I kept looking into things, I saw more evidence of other things that could also only be explained by miracles. And one of them is actually related, which is the Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin, for those who don't know, and I recommend you go take a look at that. There is a controversy with that. It was carbon dated to the 14th century, which I don't accept. And there's a lot on the internet about this. I recommend you go do your research on that. But here's the thing: the Shroud of Turin is believed to be the burial cloth of Jesus. So Jesus was buried and he had this shroud on top of him. And the moment he resurrected, he imprinted his image into the cloth. Now, centuries later, nobody has any idea how this was produced. This is a photo. This is a negative image. And this was not known. This thing exists in Europe. It shows up in Europe in the 14th century, which is why a lot of people think it's fake, because it shows up in Europe in the 14th century. Again, photography wasn't invented until the 20th century. And this in late 19th century, like this guy in the end of the 19th century takes a picture of the Shroud of Turin. Why? Just to take a picture, because I'm taking pictures of everything. And he's flabbergasted to find out that the negative of that is the perfect image, because the shroud is not a perfect image. It's just a faint silhouette of a person. But when you take a picture and you look at the negative of that picture, this is Jesus in details, like crucified by the wrists, which nobody in the Middle Ages knew. They all thought they was crucified through the hands. Every single thing that is described in the Bible, you can see in the shroud, where he was pierced, where he was flogged, where he was bitten. There's blood in the shroud, in the place, there's a crown of thorns, there's all of that. The best explanation is that somebody invented photography in the 15th century, in the 14th century, and told nobody. I mean, I don't accept that. So there is a picture of Jesus in the moment of the resurrection. I had problems in the beginning with the thing that everybody has problems with. Yeah, but like there's the carbon dating that was done and put this in the 14th century. But there's one piece of evidence against many others. I mean, if it was the only one, fine, but there are many others for the Shroud of Turin. The best explanation that I found is that when Jesus came back from the dead, he, through whatever process that I don't understand, that led to his resurrection, imprinted his image in the shroud. And why is this relevant for the Eucharist? Because there are many miracles that the Catholic Church investigate, and they're the famous one the atheists love to make fun of. The Jesus on the toast and blah blah blah. The image of Mary on a plant, and and the statue crying, and most of them are nonsense. Most of them are nonsense. But say what you want about the Catholic Church, they have a very thorough process for investigating those things, and a process through which 90+% are considered to be nonsense. Right? Yeah, this is false. This is this is a hoax. This is that. Some of them, they say, look, we don't have any other good explanation. So either we don't know it or this is a miracle. And there are some Eucharistic miracles that happen over time. What happened in those Eucharistic miracles is that the host and the wine become flesh and blood, allegedly become flesh and blood. Now, the church looks at many of those and consider many of them not to be true. But there are 3 of them that the church accepts as, look, we don't have any other good explanation. One of them in Lanciano, Italy, another one in Santarém, Portugal, and the third one in Poland, in a city that will never be able to pronounce the name. And those happened between the 6th and the 13th century, so a long time ago. And the church at the time investigated and concluded, look, we don't have any other good explanation. This became... But here's the thing. You can do scientific tests on those things today, because the Lanciano one, by the way, is from the 6th century. It is, even if you believe, this is just a piece of flesh that somebody put there to prank the whoever, this is preserved to today. You go to Lanciano, this is there. Just the fact that this survived, like a piece of flesh survived to today, is already hard to swallow. But you can do lab tests on those things. And again, it's not perfectly preserved. This would be even more miraculous. But it's preserved enough that you can run blood type tests on it. nobody knew about blood types until the 1900s. Antigen tests for blood types were invented in the 1900s. In all of those miracles, in all of those alleged Eucharistic miracles, Lanciano, Santorin, the one in Poland, and they keep happening, by the way. It's just that I want to focus on the ones that happened before we had blood type tests. In all of them, the blood type is male AB. AB is the rarest blood types of all, which just makes things more improbable. So to believe those things are not miraculous, you would have to believe that yes, you believe in coincidences, but not, there is a limit. And that's perfect. At some point, this becomes the most probable interpretation. You will have to believe that all of those pranksters in the 6th century, the 10th century, and the 12th century happen to use the right blood type, something that they do not know about. And that this blood type is the same blood type in the Shroud of Turin, even if you believe that is fake, from the 14th century. And this blood type is the same blood type in the Sudarium of Oviedo that is captured this day in Spain, whose history dates back from the 7th century, which means before the 7th century, we don't know where this was. But in the 7th century, this surfaced in history, and people believe this is the Sudarium of Oviedo is the one that they used to wipe his face, right? So they wiped Jesus' face in that Sudarium. It has blood type AB. The Shroud of Turin has blood type AB. The blood, the flesh tissue in Lanciano has blood type AB. In Santorin, blood type AB, all male. In Poland, blood type AB. Recently, 2013, there was one in Argentina, blood type AB. I mean, I'm not counting even those. I'm just counting those because now you could say, yeah, now they put blood type AB to keep 4% of the population have blood type AB. And then you just do the math. What's the chance that this is all a coincidence? It is not. And what that tells me, again, as a rational person doing the same, and maybe I'm wrong to begin with in this whole exploration, is that is the body of Christ. I went to church on Sunday and I was given this gift. How? I have no idea, which is what a lot of people say. Oh, but how does it, it tastes like bread. And yes, it doesn't, nobody claims that it transformed. Nobody claims that it doesn't look like bread. It's just bread, but in a metaphysical, spiritual level, this is the body of Christ. And in a couple of times across history, it actually, through a miracle, became that. All of that tissue is heart tissue. In all of those occurrences, it's heart tissue of blood type AB, male. And I just gave you 5 examples before the 19th century, and there are more. Wow. So I could not be a Protestant that disputes that this is the real body of Christ.
Wow. Yeah. There's a lot to your life experience. You've dedicated so much to making sure that you live in an honest way, where you can be honest with yourself. And I just really commemorate that, and I think that is so awesome. As we wrap things up, we probably don't have time to talk too much about your feelings or your past experience with my faith, but I would love for you to put your level of research and dedication to this book, because I just like how you say, well, if you're going to discount this, then you have to believe this other outrageous thing. Claiming that the Book of Mormon is not the Word of God requires an enormous admission of that, like some teenager was able to write a book in 80 something days of this magnitude. So definitely give that a look. I'm very interested in just like point Glauber at this and see like what his research can do with it. Like, because
and in all fairness, I have not researched that so deeply because again, I was already I was already
Established.
happy with the
Mm-hmm.
fact that this thing has a continuity. That is the continuity that I believe. So this is any claim that this was interrupted for me was already enough to disqualify. But
Yeah, yeah.
I'll be
Yeah, that and that makes sense. It's the same thing that, like you said, with Islam. Well,
yeah,
they don't believe that Jesus rose again, so that's easy for me to.
yeah,
There's only so much time that you have to dedicate to all
exactly,
this, and
yeah,
clearly you put in a ton of it already. So,
yeah.
so yeah, and I love that this led you to this place where you are now, where you are sharing that level of commitment with so many other people through this podcast. Um, and it really just speaks volumes about your level of dedication to what you believe to be true. And I really appreciate that about you. Was there anything that like we're over 2 hours now, but
Oh
is
yeah,
there
this.
anything that you wanted to make sure we talk about before we wrap up?
As I said, no, we do like let's give people their time back. I hope everybody. I appreciate a lot having you as a host. I think, in fact, you should just become the host, man. Just
Uh,
give me my time back.
no, no. See,
You've done masterfully, and
no.
I'm so happy
Well,
that we
thank
could do
you.
this. Yeah.
But you are the host of the Save File. Your level of
Usually,
like, and your
usually,
vision, like,
yeah.
yeah, it's there's a lot that you have done that I think is makes you the perfect person to host this podcast. So I'm grateful that you've given me the opportunity to step in for a little bit so that we could hear your past experience. I think that's good for people to understand and know their host better. That context will fill in with color the other conversations that you have in the future as well. So I love it.
Awesome, and we're gonna have you back at some point, Ken. Just be ready for it.
Okay, I look
All
forward to
right.
it.
See you,
Okay,
man.
thanks everybody.
Have a great
See ya.
one. Bye bye.